Okay, so for this particular lab, I have added a new router R8 and a new switch and two hosts H1 and H6. I also have a redeploy.sh script, um, which is here. And what this essentially does is it redeploys the my container lab topology, but for time's sake I am not redeploying because it takes a lot of time to configure and redeploy, and I have this topology already deployed on my environment. Alright, so R8, R6 and R7 have been configured in the previous lab through ZTP, and R8 is doing a very similar thing just like R6 and R7. And okay, I will quickly walk you through how that works. So I have R2 as my DHCP server, which is right here, which is directly connected to R8. And the configuration for DHCP is pretty similar to what I had in my previous lab. This is the particular subnet that gets assigned to R8, which is 192.50.108/30. I have a MAC address associated with that interface of R8, and I'm assigning the IP address 192.50.1010. As of now, there is no additional configuration on this device. As you can see here, interface Ethernet 1 and Ethernet 2 and Ethernet 3 don't have any configuration, and this is just the base config. So first I will ask for an IP address on Ethernet 1 because R8 connects to R2 on Ethernet 1 interface of R8, and R2 connects at Ethernet 3. So I'm gonna first delete any stale sessions, and I will ask for an IP address. Sorry, this is the wrong interface. And meanwhile, while I do this, if you remember, I had this particular script called ZTP.service, and what this is a systemd service which calls this Python file, and what it does is it constantly pings R8, R7 and R6 the IP address which is associated to it, and once it's reachable, that is once it gets the IP address from the DHCP server, it pushes the configuration which is stored in this folder, which is ZTP and R8 config.cfg. Now if we go here, you can see that my ZTP.service, I will show you the status of it. Okay, and so it pushed the configuration, the ZTP.service, which is active and running. And what it did is it SSH'd, it first pinged this IP address which was assigned here. It just pulled it up from the DHCP server, and it constantly pings 192.50.1010 IP address, which once that gets assigned to Ethernet 1, then it SSHs to this device using this IP address and configures the device. As you can see here, the OSPF neighborship has been formed with R2 in area 20. And this particular IP address, which is 192.50.100.1, is this IP address, and 192.50.100.1 is the default gateway for H6 and H1. Okay, so that is how I've established ZTP, which is pretty similar to what I did in the previous lab, except I had some configuration changes and I had to update this particular Python file, which is ztp.py, to also include R8. Apart from that, I also had to configure Prometheus and SNMP exporter for monitoring. So if I go back to R8, it configured SNMP server, which was pulled from this file. Basically, we are just simulating how DHCP would give a file would give the TFTP server's IP address, and the TFTP server would give the file for the routers to configure themselves, but I just simulated it through the script that I have. Okay, so for monitoring, I updated SNMP exporter in Prometheus to pull the newly added devices, which is R6, R7 and R8. So this is SNMP exporter, and if I just put the IP address of, let's say, R8, it gives me all of this information. That is, it is just pulling SNMP, it is just doing an SNMP poll on R8, and this particular information is read by Prometheus. And as you can see, these are all the targets that Prometheus is constantly polling from, and the last three devices are the newly added devices. As you can see, 192.50.10 is up, and then we have 5102, which is R6, and this is R7, and this is R8. Now with regards to my IPAM, I've also updated my IPAM to include the newly added devices. If you see here, I initially had R1 to R5, but I also added R6, R7 and R8. For example, if I just open R6 and interfaces, you'll see that I have two interfaces with configured IP addresses. I also have R8 with two interfaces with two IP addresses, and R7 should only have one interface with an IP address. So that's how I've updated my IPAM, my monitoring and ZTP.